Good afternoon, everyone. Buenos tardes. Bujun Indinoy Maganatug, Tanshikia, Melissa Nelson Indigene Kaz, Makunzi Gabui Kidash Nindigo, Nin Anishinaabe Ikwe, Piju Dodem, Mikinakwajuing, Turtle Mountain Chippewa, Nindunjiba, Miu Miigwech. That's a traditional Ojibwe protocol greeting that in our language and in our culture, we identify our ancestors and who we come from and our native name and our native clans. So my ancestors greet all of your ancestors. And I'm so touched and heartened to be here, especially after the rich, extraordinary teachings of Roxanne and her son Porter this morning. Thank you. And grounding us in this land, this Tiwa land of enchantment here in northern New Mexico. I've been traveling and visiting this land for just a little over 30 years and have so many kindred spirits here and have been so welcomed by so many of the knowledge keepers of the Pueblos. So it is an honor to be here. And I'll share you a little bit about my journey with seeds. I want to talk a little bit about seed to seed, the rematriation movement and regeneration and revitalization movement that's happening across Turtle Island. At lunch, Roxanne and I were saying, can you believe how it's magnified exponentially just in the last 20 years, 10 years, 5 years? Everyone is going back to their traditional seeds. So it's been such an honor to do this work through the Cultural Conservancy and many other networks, and to learn from beloved Wendy Johnson and her husband Peter, just extraordinary farmers and seed keepers and soil regenerators. So we've been building a network of wonderful people in the San Francisco Bay Area who are deeply connected to the land and wanting to renew ancient seeds in modern times. I'd like to start by sharing a simple poem by one of my teachers, Chickasaw poet, writer, Linda Hogan. If you don't know her work, check her out. Novelist, poet, essayist, rascal. And she's quite an elder now and still writing. And this is a beautiful poem that I think shares so much about the intention of planting life. Sometimes the way to milk and honey is through the body. Sometimes the way in is a song. But there are 3 ways in the world: dangerous, wounding, and beauty. To enter stone, be water. To rise through hard earth, be plant, desiring sunlight, believing in water. To enter fire, be dry. To enter life, be food. What is the way in for us? The way in and the way out. These are some gorgeous sacred seeds photographed by the Cultural Conservancy media director, Mateo Hinojosa, a brilliant artist. And he has just really gone deep into a wonderful, wonderful seed visualization. He did a fantastic film with master seed keeper Rowan White called Seed Mother. Maybe tonight, it's only 7 minutes, or tomorrow night, we could get a chance to review it. So what seeds and waters do you come from? I've been fortunate to travel across the mighty Pacific to Aotearoa, to the long white clouds, the people of the Maori. And when they introduce each other, they say, Kauai koi, wai being water. What waters do you come from, being ocean people? What waters do you come from? And when Native people meet each other all over the world, what waters, what seeds, what people do you come from? I was fortunate to co-teach, co-design a Guardians of the Waters youth program for 7 years. And we started with our youth always. What seeds do you come from? What waters? So the lands and waters that I come from, I always acknowledge my ancestors' lands, the Turtle Mountains of North Dakota, Manitoba. We were bisected by that international boundary like so many tribes. We covered a whole range from the Great Lakes to the Rocky Mountains, following the bison herds. So we are bison people, not traditionally agricultural people. The great Anishinaabe Confederacy, the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, the Odawa, that really covered a massive distance from even the East Coast to the Great Lakes into the Northern Plains. And then the Cree coming down from further north, the Caribou people. One of my ancestresses married Caribou from the Caribou clan. So these are my people, my indigenous people. I also come from settlers, like many of us. The French fur traders that came through and mixed early with my people, the Ojibwe and the Cree, for the fur trade. And then later, the Scandinavians. My father is Norwegian. I'm very, very proud of all the waters and all the seeds that give me life today. I grew up, though, this body on the South Fork of the Eel River in Sinkyone country, up in beautiful Mendocino County, with the tall redwood trees, the tallest trees in the world. So I've been very, very blessed to be a settler and try to be a good neighbor on those lands and in those beautiful waters. If you haven't been there, you must go. It's called the Lost Coast, because the land was so treacherous, the highway could not go there. So it goes inland, and there's this massive area that is now managed by one of the first native land trusts in America, the Intertribal Sinkyone Wilderness Council. Wonderful organization. So that's a little bit about the lands and the peoples, my ancestors. I'm also come from berries. I come from seeds. I was happy to be part of a wonderful collection called What Kind of Ancestor Do You Want to Be? I want to be like a berry. I want to be one of our choke cherries, June berries, or cranberries. Another name for our tribe before the Turtle Mountain Band was the Pembina Band on the Red River of the North. And the Pembina is a misinterpretation of our name for Pembina, which means the cranberry people. So we come from cranberry people. So I have a great affinity for the berry relatives. A little more of some of my aunties and my parents. They both have moved on to the other side just in the last couple of years, in 2020 and 2021. And I honor them, Teresa and Carlisle, and my aunties, and our great chief, Little Shell, who led our nation in many, many wonderful adventures and battles and resistance movements to maintain our nation despite all odds. And the community that I have co-created in Northern California is the Cultural Conservancy. I didn't found it. It was founded by, as they say, some well-meaning white ladies who wanted to help protect sacred lands. So a lot of our first work was not as much about food, but about sacred lands and religious freedom, protecting sacred sites of Native peoples that were always under threat, housing, freeways, mining, you name it. And so through this intertribal organization, we have worked to develop native land trusts and protect sites that are being threatened, whether urban or rural, throughout the US and even in Hawaii. We've done quite a bit of work with Pacific Islanders as well. And this is our famous seed spiral that we'll be talking about. And we've started to realize that so many of our sacred lands also contained deep medicines, very special plants, very special animals, clays, minerals, sites to observe the stars at certain times of the year. And so we started getting even more into what is often called ethnobotany, really looking at traditional ecological knowledge and the indigenous sciences of plants, managing our growing ones, our rooted ones in the plant world. Native California Indians did not have to develop agriculture. So much biodiversity, so much beauty, so much salmon, the coastal areas filled with seaweed and abalone and shellfish and lobster. So they didn't have to farm. But after all of the conquests, the various conquests with the Spanish and the Mexican and the American periods, the 31 flavors of colonization that Porter talked about, finally, the Native peoples of California said, we need to start planting seeds too, and we need to learn from others. There were always small gardens of tobacco and special plants, and certainly along the Colorado River, the desert tribes that are more connected here to the Southwest. So we learned a lot from the California Indian basket weavers about plants and seeds. And we developed our goals really around the relationship to the lands. I won't go through all of them, but tending the fire, so much what our elders and our elder men talk about, tending the fires, mending the circles, mending all of the broken circles of our food systems and our health systems and our care systems, nourishing the soil, literally and figuratively with compost, as we'll talk about later with Wendy. Sharing good water is the name of our regranting program. We're able to provide small grants, like little drops of good water to refresh and replenish projects. Animating our voices, no longer being silent. We are still here. We will not be silent. We will not be marginalized. We have a wonderful media program with all kinds of videos and podcasts and all different types of media. Clearing the spring, decolonizing our minds, decolonizing our hearts, decolonizing our bodies with traditional, nutritious, ancestral foods. We are all hungry for our ancestral foods. They feed us in a way that is so profound, so profound. So we've looked around and talked to many, many different Native peoples along Turtle Island, and we started to do this fun map of our food sheds. What are our watersheds? Who are the first peoples of the land? Doing our land acknowledgement, our watershed acknowledgement, and our food shed acknowledgement. What are our totem foods? What are the foods that give us life? What are the cultural keystone species and keystone processes that sustain resilient ecosystems and resilient permacultures, indigenous communities who've been on the land for thousands and thousands of years, since time immemorial? This is just a fun little map we played with and encourage everyone to do their own self-determined map based on the foods and the seeds and the waters that give you life. So the three main goals and areas that we've focused on, and that's been part of my own revitalization process as a mixed race Native woman: honor ancestral lands, honor the lands always that you're on, recognize and respect the indigenous cultures, and know that their traditional knowledge is the one that has co-evolved and co-adapted with those ecosystems for thousands of years. They are the true scientists. One of my other beloved elders, Rose Imai, passed away recently, and she talked about the first scientist being a pregnant woman leaning over and planting seeds. That was our first scientist. These are two incredible elders I've learned with, one also recently passed on the other side. So we are not farming people traditionally in Northern California. The first peoples there, they are Salmon Nation people. They're people of the temperate rainforest. They work along that beautiful coastline. So I've been very, very fortunate to learn about some of those traditional resource management practices of the coast that are also tied to their first foods, their first salmon ceremonies. Abalone woman, many profound stories about the relationship to ocean women that I know travel inland through songs and stories into the middle of the desert here. So through our work, we really have focused on how do we nourish our native lands and our native cultures. We know they always go together. So today there's so many exciting movements happening, intersecting movements of resilience with elders teaching youngers, youngers teaching elders, people getting back into the land back movement, the land and seed rematriation movements, food sovereignty as part of international processes, food justice, working with our Black, Latinx, LGBTQ, urban communities who also want food justice, any marginalized people who have been in food, suffered from a food apartheid, not having access to clean, healthy foods or clean soil to grow your ancestral seeds. So we work to decolonize our diets one bite at a time. And again, Roxanne, your work with the Pueblo experience, food experience, has been so critical to so many of us. And I teach your book in my classes, and students are just blown away by the power of going back to ancestral foods. We're doing this to restore our native health, always to restore the abundance of our cultural health, our well-being, and to support our sovereignty and self-determination as embedded in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, such an important document. And we know that not only do seeds and foods have nutritional value and cultural value, they have profound spiritual value. And this is connected to what we sometimes talk about as our cosmogenealogies. We all have inheritance. We all come from native lands, indigenous lands, going way, way back long ago. We're all native to Mother Earth in many ways. But as one of my Chumash elders used to say, Europeans put down the drum. They put down the drum. They forgot the heartbeat of Mother Earth and stopped listening to that drum. But Native people, we know we come from our sacred seeds, our berries, Mother Ocean, corn, maize, corn mother, and that we are cosmically, and to us, genealogically related to our first foods. That's something that's very hard to get across to a lot of people, how profound that is. So when we say rematriation, back to the mother, repatriation, back to the father, it's not a metaphor for us. It's quite literal, back into that womb, like the kiva that was spoken about earlier. And we also talked about trade and how important it is that we've been trading for thousands of years. Trade is not new. This is what Robin Kimmerer and Rowan White have called our kinship networks, to revitalize our kinship networks. So we've been sharing seeds and foods across territories, homelands, and ecosystems all across Turtle Island, north and south, east and west. We know that seeds of many colors and varieties come from all over, warm hand to warm hand. We know that salt comes from the ocean and from the desert and is exchanged and traded from the north and south. Dried fish from the rivers, the trout from the lakes, from the ocean, the seaweeds have been found inland in archaeological sites like the beautiful abalone shells. Pine nuts from the mountains head west to the coastal tribes, the delicious little pine nuts from the mountains. We know that different species of acorn, in California, there are over 20 different species of oak trees, giving all different types and varieties of beautiful, delicious nuts. They have to be processed, they have to be leached, they're all different. And there's beautiful Miwok and Maidu stories about the little acorns being sisters, and they all have different hats on, different caps. Some are smooth, some are wild, some are tiny, some are loud, and all of them have a different flavor and the different quality. And then we know the foodway items that was exchanged here with the pottery, the baskets, the pottery, all of the different digging sticks, all the instruments and utensils we use, eating out of wooden bowls with mussel shell spoons, how important it is to bring back those foodways. So we decided to really dive into urban gardening and food justice in the San Francisco and Oakland Bay Area. 70% of Native Americans in the United States live in urban areas, and almost all of them in poorer, marginalized areas without access to clean food, suffering from many forms of environmental racism, their neighborhoods being sited next to dump sites, incinerators, toxic sites, oil refineries, etc. And so the need for clean food to grow and to share and to gather in is so essential. So we first started by restoring an old World War II victory garden in the Presidio National Park after it was transferred from a military base to a national park with the Ohlone descendants of that area. We were then invited by the Intertribal Friendship House, a recovery center at their women's lodge, to develop a Three Sisters garden and to do horticultural therapy. One of our program directors at the time was getting her counseling psychology degree and working with the women and the children. It was really a wonderful opportunity. But then the 2008 crash came and all the financial issues happened. And as a nonprofit, they had to sell that site. We had to tear up this garden. It was so painful, as many of you know, so painful. We realized we have to have our own space. We've helped dozens of other Native communities acquire and become stewards to belong to their homelands again. But as an intertribal organization, we know we're not Ohlone, we're not Coast Miwok. We really needed their permission. And then it was thanks to the good grace of working with Wendy Johnson that we started talking about our work in organic food and food systems. And she said, I'm co-managing and co-founded a farm not far from here, the Indian Valley Organic Farm and Garden at the College of Marin in Novato, California, just 20 minutes north of the Golden Gate Bridge, accessible to the whole Bay Area community. And really, what a gift, Wendy, that was for our community to welcome us to good, clean, organic soil, where we started planting Three Sisters of many varieties. Over the years, through all the exchanging, we had already a little seed bank and no land to grow out our seeds. So finally, we had a beautiful, beautiful site. And then I'll talk about our newest farm here in Shadow. So Indian Valley Organic Farm and Garden, as I mentioned, co-founded by our Wendy Johnson, 5 acres. It's a teaching farm. Wendy used to teach organic farming there, a certificate for students. So we got to take advantage of that and learn from that, our staff, our volunteers, our community. We started partnering in 2012 with a beautiful Three Sisters area. And then we asked for permission from the Coast Miwok people. They were so excited we were doing that with you. You had already gotten permission from them previously, from their elders and council members. And so we did an ethnobotanical area as well, because they wanted their elderberry and their bay nuts and their acorns and all their medicinal Oregon grape and manzanita, all their native wild foods. So we have an ethnobotanical area on the edge with also some basket plants, but also a cultivated area on the edge of the wild and cultivated worlds. So it's such a gift, and we're still farming there, I think going into our 13th or 14th year. 14th year, yes. So it was really a great community, mixture of community. We had the wealthy Marin ladies, well-meaning white ladies who wanted their little gardens. We had the ragtag urban indigenous youth from Oakland. We had my students from San Francisco State. We had so many different, your students, Wendy, that you're training. And we did incredible work and are still doing great work there. So we started farming. Look at the lushness of that land. It's a real little hot microclimate, and you can grow tomatoes, peppers, corn, very, very hot. Also a little rattlesnake pit, as we found out. But we love our relatives there. We've worked with them very well. I was working at the time with Kaylina Bray. I'm still working with her in many capacities. Just a beautiful young Seneca woman who had just completed her degree at Brown University, came to California fresh to just see what was there, and started working with our Foodways program. And she was kind of quiet. Well, my parents were kind of corn farmers. We started asking around. We found out they were just very revered Seneca white corn growers. And I had learned about that seed from John Mohawk much, much earlier. So Kaylina and her parents brought us the gift of the Iroquois white corn in a series of teachings very deep over a 5-year period about the meaning of it, the mounds, the quality of the seed, then the harvesting, the green corn ceremony, cooking many different varieties. Another Wendy Bray, she just can grow and cook about 12 different dishes with the same white corn, and you would never know it was the same thing. Dumplings, soups, cake, porridge, cookies. It's just fantastic. And so we did a planting ceremony. We do a traditional planting ceremony and harvesting ceremony open to the whole public there. And have had such a blessed time growing this Iroquois white corn. There are a number of Haudenosaunee people, Six Nations people living in the Bay Area due to relocation, like how my family ended up in the Bay Area. Forgot to mention it's one of the most diverse and highly populated native urban community in the US. And we also wanted to go back to the roots, to our teosinte. I loved how Porter said, how did this little tropical grass get to go all the way up to Canada and become this, abundant, delicious food source for so many tribes? That is really a good question. And it takes a while. But we wanted, just like we always want the young ones to be around their elders, we always grow teosinte, the ancestor of corn, on the edges of our crops. And then here you see our lovely three sisters and growing squash of many varieties and beans of many varieties, including the scarlet runner that we will be planting here together. So the sacred white corn, Oneogen, we've really learned so much, hand grinding, machine grinding. I'm curious about your new machine, all the different ways to process this delicious white corn. And just show, we nixtamalized it too, the handful there on the left. So we've been rematriating seeds via cultural trade in these networks. Today, the Cultural Conservancy distributes thousands of pounds of food throughout the Bay Area to urban Indian cultural centers, Native American health centers, schools for powwows, round dances, graduations, different ceremonies and events. We also create starts and distribute plant starts, such as the Cherokee tomato, such a delicious, one of my favorite. We also work with tule and willow and other basket materials and try to gather those up. And we just gifted one of the Coast Miwok groups a bunch of tule, and they put together and created a tule boat and took it out onto Mollis Bay. And it was the first time they had done that in probably over 100 years. And so it's directly tied to all these cultural revitalization efforts. Again, the sacred salt, and then we exchange labor. Because so many of these little land rematriation projects and urban farms are popping up everywhere. We need, what labor's like? Samu? Samu, how important that is. And we don't have a lot of money, but we do have our time. So we've been going around and supporting each other in our gardens and our farms and our orchards. This is Pawnee spotted eagle corn that Clayton Brascape of the Traditional Native American Farmers Association just entrusted us with last season, and we were able to grow out maybe not, I don't even know how many pounds, a lot. And this is a handful, and I was just able to bring some back to Clayton just the other day here up at Tasuki. So again, this cycle, this spiral of goodness and exchange keeps happening. And to bring some to Roxanne. That's right. Absolutely. It's here to share. Yes. This is also a great story because even with our 5 acres, and we only do maybe 2 acres at Indian Valley Organic Farm, and it's very hot, and we really wanted to do papas, potatoes. We've also grown quinoa. We have many Quechua, Maya, and Aymara relatives in the South who have given us seed. And so we've done different South American indigenous crops as well. But this potato, the macaw ozette potato, kind of bypassed a lot of normal colonialism and went from the Spanish directly up to the macaw people in Washington state and adapted to the whaling people and growing up in that temperate rainforest. So it likes cool and moist, and it didn't do well at Indian Valley. So Wendy had the great idea. Do you have a mic? Do you want to share a little bit about this? She said, well, we need where do I know a cool, damp, coastal place to grow potatoes?
This was really amazing. Again, San Francisco Zen Center has the gift of good land. And immediately upon seeing the amount of seed potatoes that had been received from the macaw country, this is a potato that's on the endangered food arc. Its genetics are so important because it's a potato that has never been exposed to blight. So it's an extraordinarily important potato, and it has to be grown on the coast. So we went to Zen Center and said, what about it? Let's connect. Let's have a partnership with the Cultural Conservancy. Let's grow out a row of these potatoes. What do you think? Yes. 150-foot long row, Roxanne, 150 feet of beautiful, deep, 40-year-old bottom soil. The macaw potato went in there and said, yeah, this is good for me. I smell the ocean. Yes. I'm away from the heat. And the harvest was amazing. I think you have a picture, right, Melissa, later?
I think so, yes.
If not, the harvest was amazing. Yeah. More than 300 pounds from 25 pounds of potatoes, which is an extraordinary, and every single one was returned to the Cultural Conservancy.
That's right. And then distributed, because everyone loves potatoes. You can do anything with potatoes. Yeah. And so it was great to have in our food boxes. And
it was also one of the strongest potatoes we ever grew because it hasn't been messed with. It hasn't been hybridized. It hasn't been exposed to blight. It was a gift to hold the seed and see it come up out of the ground. And there they are playing with it. Notice the calm Zen Center student in the middle. She's dressed very modestly, and the native team is pretty excited to see those macaws.
Yeah. So we are so grateful for this partnership. So we're also able to grow out now with all the organic farms and the network in Northern California when a seed is better adapted, just like you're doing here between your different sites. So that's redundancy is part of resilience, right? And we've been able to do this beautifully. Just some other seeds we've grown, the cranberry bean, which is so beautiful and delightful. The seed spiral there with the scarlet runner, the oneo white corn, zuni gold. We have acorns in the middle. We grow all 4 tepary beans as a gift from the Tohono O'odham and Native Seed Search, the black, white, tan, and blue speckled. And then in the middle here, honoring the native bay nut, California laurel. It's like a little avocado, and you don't eat the flesh, but you roast the nut and you grind it up or eat them just fresh. They have a little caffeine in them. So they're a little peppy and they're a little peppery to taste, and they're delicious. If you roast them and grind them and make cakes out of them, it's like, we call it pomo chocolate. Yeah.
We have a tiny little section of Roxanne's Anasazi bean in there too.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yes. So we know and don't need to belabor, but it's still a serious issue that we have had a broken basket of our food systems. The temptation, the cost, and the ease of access to fast food nation. Many communities have to travel 50 miles to get fresh produce, much less organic, but you can drive 5 minutes and have fast food. We know that many lands are caught up in private property. Traditional gathering sites are completely off limits for Native people to go gather. That's really cut us off from traditional foods and medicine. Pollution is severe in a place as populated as California. The waterways, the air pollution, toxic runoff, remnants from Department of Interior, all those military bases. There's a lot of waste and a lot of pollution, which has created what Dene food activist Denisa Livingston has coined diabesities, an epidemic of diabesities for Native people, nutritionally related illnesses. So we need to mend our broken basket and heal these disrupted food systems. And going back to our ancestral foods is a big key to this solution and strategy. So after farming for almost a decade with Wendy at Indian Valley, they went through a big leadership change also at the college, like all colleges do, and became much more regulated. And we were having to follow a lot more rules, and it was okay. We're still there. We're still partners, long-term partners, but our space just felt more confined. And we put out this intention, the Cultural Conservancy has really helped a lot of indigenous communities get their land back. Maybe we're ready for that. Even though we're intertribal, maybe we are ready to get some land back. And honestly, I just kind of put out that intention. And about a month later, this elder lady calls and said, I have this old farm in Sonoma County and I want to give it to some Indians. And I heard you do good work. She said, I asked organizations coast to coast and everyone said, I need to talk to you in the Cultural Conservancy. I said, okay, long story short, bless her. She's amazing and she enabled this dream to come true. And long story short, we purchased the land half price. She couldn't afford to actually give it away because she'd be destitute, and we didn't want that. She has a heart of gold. Interestingly, she was raised in Mexico by indigenous women, and she never forgot that. And so in her elder age, no spouse, no children, she just wanted it to go back to Native people. So it's a fantastic place. We had a gifting ceremony where we had to extinguish private property and revitalize indigenous belonging to this place. And we did that with a number of elders and the Tribal Council of the Federated Indians of Rancheria. Some of their council members and citizens came. And it was during that gifting exchange that this experience happened that gave us the name Heron Shadow, as this beautiful heron blessed us, and we can all take shelter under the shadow of the great blue heron. And so we've been there now planting lots of native seeds. It was dilapidated. It hadn't been cared for. She was alone. She was elderly and not able to do much there. But in a way, it was good. Talk about fallow land. It had time. All the little coyotes were coming through, and the foxes and the ravens, and had a lot of critters, beautiful bird populations. So it's been a long-term process, but we had it in 2019. That's when we finally really reconnected to it as the official stewards. And then we, of course, had to get a greenhouse, Redbird, Edward Willie, Pomo Wailaki, Paiute, land managers, extraordinary knowledge keeper, TEK specialist, and he was so happy to return to his ancestral land. So he's our resident there and the official land steward. And then this is actually quapaw corn that we were growing, and Wendy Bray came up to check out this corn, which was very different from her Iroquois white corn. And so we're, of course, honoring all the principles of, kind of a polycultural indigenous agriculture. And low till, no till, of course, of the drought we've had the last few years. We have to be very careful with water. We're doing Three Sisters, intertribal farming. We have an area where people can come up with their ancestral seeds and grow out and decide what they want to grow there, as long as it doesn't, interfere with the plan of the other main farming practices. So you're all welcome to come visit. Very much like Roxanne. In fact, there's Roxanne when she visited our Indian Valley Organic Farm in 2014 as part of a Bioneers pre-conference traditional ecological knowledge workshop. That's with Robin Kimmerer, the wonderful Sage La Pena, California Indian herbalist and traditional doctor, Kaylina Bray, and Rachel Bagby, a wonderful singer some of you may know. And so we've had lots of different teaching events to do land-based teachings directly on the ground, listening to the land. And then here's our Heron Shadow, and this is deeply transformed. This was all just a compact hill of exotic grasses, and this has all gone in just in the last couple of years. And in a way, even though the pandemic was so tragic for so many with loss of life. And so sorry for those of you who lost loved ones due to the virus. You know, we were all going stir crazy inside, and everyone wanted to get out of the city and come up and do work at Heron Shadow. So many hands makes little work. We were like, take that field, dig this ditch, put up that fence, and people were just hungry to get outside and use the land. So we were very much blessed to have a safe gathering place to meet. I mean, it's 8 acres, so you can, you know, spread out. People could grieve and cry and go sleep under the stars, do what was needed. And then harvest time. There's those Cherokee tomatoes, Troy. Yes, they are delicious. He's going to be growing some this year. My favorite. Some of the Buffalo Creek squash, again, that Clayton shared with us, that we've been growing out, and now is going to Wapapa's Kitchen, one of the first Native American restaurants in the San Francisco Bay Area in Oakland. So she's using a lot of the food that we grow in her restaurant recipes. And just again, some of our proud harvesters. This is Maya Harjo on the left. And it's a story really she should tell. But after being a steward and learning from the Brays and growing Iroquois white corn for many, many years, she grew up in LA, urban Indian like a lot of us, but deeply connected to food systems, received a degree in horticulture from UC Santa Cruz. And she was one of our youth, actually, in the Guardians of the Waters youth program. And she's just a shining bright star. Hope you're watching, Maya. And she just wanted to become a farmer, and she wanted to grow out her quapaw, traditional corn from Oklahoma, which hadn't been grown out, I think, in many decades, I think over 50 years. And she couldn't get the seed because it's only in a seed bank, a non-native seed bank, that were really hoarding it. And she called them, she wrote them, she, I think, got her tribe to write a letter, and they said, no, we can't release it because it's not, I don't know, maybe we weren't tribal trust lands, I'm not sure why, but they told her definitively no. She was really disappointed. About 2-3 weeks later, she gets a little envelope in the mail, no return address, with some quapaw corn. So good people, good karma. So this is a beautiful red corn, and we'll be doing it for a second season. And just to show you the heft of these squash, the Buffalo Creek squash, and it's a delicious nutty orange flesh, really good. And again, more wild harvesting is so important to keep that up as well, especially for the local elders who weren't really farmers. They love the food, but they need to taste the foods that they tasted as children and that their parents gave them for special occasions. And then we've been very, very fortunate to work with so many indigenous chefs and be part of the early Native American Culinary Association events with people like Sean Sherman, the Sioux chef, who has now a famous restaurant in Minneapolis, Lois Ellen Frank, right here at Red Mesa Cuisine, Walter Whitewater, Brian Yazzie. I mean, there's so many wonderful Native chefs now. The Ohlone Cafe in California, Crystal Wapapa. So I was able to bring out some chefs to ASU last year, and we fed over 100 students and faculty Native foods. And this was a green chili stuffed with bison, yes, and a red chili sauce. It was so delicious. And then one of my favorites, manomin, wild rice and berries. That's one of my staples. And then here we are in the process of working with the nixtamalization of the corn. So you've got to feast your heritage, eat your heritage. Yeah. And I think this is a good time to talk about, not only did we trade our foods as a way of having international diplomacy to increase nutrition, we need a little salt from here, a little protein from there, etc., our cuisine, to diversify our cuisine. But we actually made treaties nation to nation around our foods. And I didn't speak about it as much this time. I did at the Varela Symposium about the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe territories between the Great Lakes and the East Coast on the St. Lawrence Seaway. And due to migrations, voluntary and involuntary migrations, we were kind of competing for territory and resources at one time. But we developed our one dish, one spoon treaty between our various confederacies. So even the Haudenosaunee represents 6 nations. The Anishinaabe represent at least 3 nations. We're talking like a confederacy of like 10 indigenous nations coming together to talk about sharing the resources of the river, the lakes, the forests, the berries, the bison. It's agreement of mutual coexistence and cooperation to share our land and our food peacefully. The dish is obviously the land, and the spoon is each individual of each nation to get that one spoonful so that you are nourished, not too much, not too little. The treaty is encoded and recorded on wampum belts, traditional ways of language and record keeping, archiving. And it's an agreement to take care of the land so it will continue to sustain the nations forever. And there's actually going to be a renewal of this treaty in August that Kayleen and I can go to, because Kayleen represents Haudenosaunee and I represent Anishinaabe. And all the clan leaders and the Midewin leaders, the medicine leaders, are coming together next year at Onondaga, or this year, later this summer. So we're going to be renewing this treaty, which is very powerful. I also want to let you know about a wonderful new book coming out, a new book by Dr. Lois Ellen Frank, incredible food historian, culinary anthropologist, chef, photographer, and she's focusing on what she calls the Magic 7, the native foods that were given to the world from the native peoples of the Americas. So obviously corn, beans, and squash, and all those varieties, tomatoes and chile, and then things that chocolate, we know, cacao from your land, Mesoamerica, but vanilla also comes from Mesoamerica. Often we think of like Madagascar and Africa. So this is part story and history and ethnography, but also with recipes and ingredients. And Lois is very pragmatic in how to make a delicious native meal on a budget and how to do it affordably and easily. You know, go to Trader Joe's and get frozen organic corn if you need to. Go get organic tomato sauce from this company. Like she gets it down to like, for $8, you can create this incredible 3 sisters stew for a family of 4. I mean, it's awesome. So not to be missed. Look out the Cultural Conservancy website. We're probably going to do some food events this fall around this book, and she'll do some readings and cooking around it. And then being in Arizona, I've been so blessed to learn from the Apache and the Akimel O'odham and Tohono O'odham and the people of the mountains and the deserts there. And some of my students are working with Twyla Casador, who is really well known from the great film Gather for her hunting the little wood rats. And she's just amazing. She comes and speaks to our students. She's so generous with her time, mentoring Apache students about traditional food foraging. And then one of my students is working on a wonderful project, the Chichil Apache countermapping project. Chichil is the Western Apache word for their little acorn, and it's the only acorn in the world that you don't need to leach the tannic acids out of. It's more like a little pine nut. It's very little, and you just crack it open and pop it in. It's so delicious. And it too has been really, people with all the development there, they just cut down huge swaths of the trees. And so she's mapping all the little remnant stands of their traditional Chichil oak forests to revitalize them and renew them and teach other Apache and others about the use of them as food source. So Twyla has been really great in supporting that. And again, back to California, this is what many people call tending the wild, tending and mending the wild. with those agroecological processes, with gathering wild native seeds, the chia, the pinole, and really going back to those highly nutritious seed plants that was so much a part of the ancestral diet. And then working with the tule and the cattail and all the freshwater plants too, to make things like traditional tule boats, to travel again out on the lakes and the ponds and the creeks and the rivers, to fish and to gather the life there. And we're also growing native food networks and relations. I've been very, very happy to be part of the slow food movement for a very long time with leader Winona LaDuke, who was involved very early on in the early 2000s in Italy, and always advocating for our indigenous food systems. And now there is an indigenous Terra Madre network, a world network of indigenous food producers, processors, artists, chefs, etc. And then locally, we have a Slow Food Turtle Island Association that is the native peoples of Turtle Island, US, Canada, and Mexico. Hawaiians are involved a bit too by default, and Alaska Natives, but I think the Hawaiians and the Pacific Islanders want to do their own association as appropriate. But yeah, we work with this Alaska Natives and people from the North Coast, and also some Dene and Yaqui relatives at an event, Slow Food Nation at Denver. And here's just a map that's not even complete of some of the indigenous Terra Madre network with indigenous Arc of Taste producers of rare, delicious, nutrient-dense indigenous foods that, again, are those first foods that give those peoples and those nations life and sustain the ecosystems in a resilient and regenerative way. So we should all go check out the Terra Madre Network. There's biannual gatherings. I was fortunate to go to Ainu territory in 2019, where they hosted an indigenous Terra Madre network. Learning about the Ainu foods of northern Japan was just extraordinary. And seed to soil, transformation through compost. We can't talk about regeneration without talking about degeneration. And as you all know, I think many of you got to do compost with Wendy Bray earlier in the week, and it's an experience not to be missed. When I tell a lot of my native students, they're like, we're going to do compost with this wonderful, Euro-American farmer. They're like, yeah, all right. And then we get out there, and in 5 minutes, they're in love with Wendy. And Wendy just makes it so fun and exciting to really get down and dirty with the compost. So she has a poem, and I have a poem about compost. Do you want to do yours first? You want to? Okay. I just want to say in closing that another concept we talk about more in academia is this concept of biocultural diversity. We all talk about biodiversity. We know that biological diversity, all our plants and animals and fungi and animal relatives, the more than human world is endangered right now, and it's in hurting, in peril, and we need to protect it. We need to protect them, our relatives. But equally endangered is cultural diversity and all of the rich, diverse languages that indigenous people speak, the ways of knowing, the ways of doing, the ways of learning, the ways of relating, the ways of caring for each other and taking care of each other. So reweaving our baskets means really restoring and trading these indigenous seeds that empower our cultures, our cuisines, our health systems, our life ways, and represents the diversity and unity of all life together. So thank you for listening. I will close with a poem about compost that I think just really ties things together here. Stop sharing. Stop sharing, right? Great, finding that. I don't know if anyone knows the poet Patty Ann Rogers. She's amazing. Oh, of course you do, yes. You know Geocentric? The poem is called Geocentric, right? We all need to become more geocentric, focused on the earth. Or as the poet Robinson Jeffers said, a little too abstract, a little too wise. It is time for us to kiss the earth again. Geocentric. Okay, it's a tough one. Indecent, self-soiled, bilious reek of turnip and toadstool decay, dribbling the black oil of wilted succulents, the brown fester of rotting orchids in plain view, that stain of stink corn down your front, that leaking roil of bracken fungi down your back, you purple-haired, grainy fuzz smolder of refuse, fathering fumes and boils and powdery mildews, enduring the constant interruption of sink mire, flatulence, contagious with earwax, corn smut, blister rust, backwash, and graveyard debris. Rich with manure bog and dry rot, harboring not only egg-addled garbage and wrinkled lip of orange peel mold, but also the clotted breath of overripe radish and burnt leek, bearing every dank, malodorous rut and scarp, all sulfur fissures and fetid hillside seepages, old, dependable, engendering forever, the stench and stretch and warm seethe of inevitable putrefaction. Nobody loves you as I do. Thank you. Right? Isn't it great? Do we have time for, barely, any questions? Reflections?
Thank you so much. I just want to be mindful of the reality of time because we have, I just want to be mindful of the reality of time. It's important for us to have a brief stretch. And Alonso is going to go back to the deep Mayan world from which corn was spun, and in a way it was a DNA spin. Corn could not have come into being without the human hand twisting and turning it into life. So we'll have a chance, Melissa, tomorrow in the late afternoon after our post-planting rest, and if that's okay. Let's be real, because boy, it has been, I'm beginning to feel like compost actually right now. So, so let's just take a brief stretch while Alonso gets his presentation ready. And thank you, dear Melissa.